The Speaker, House of Representatives, Madam, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I have the honor to transmit a sealed envelope received from the White House on March 13, 2020 at 5:28 p.m. and said to contain a message from the President on declaring a national emergency concerning the novel coronavirus disease outbreak. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Cheryl L. Johnson, Clerk of the House.
Report the message.
To the Congress of the United States, pursuant to Section 201 of the National Emergencies Act, 50 United States Code 1621, I hereby report that I have exercised my authority to declare that the outbreak of coronavirus disease in the United States constitutes a national emergency. This declaration invokes Section 1135 of the Social Security Act, 42 United States Code, to allow the Secretary of Health and Human Services to exercise the authority under that section to temporarily waive or modify certain requirements of the Medicare, Medicaid, and state children's health insurance programs of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act privacy rule throughout the duration of the public health emergency declared in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. I'm enclosing a copy of the proclamation I have issued. Signed, Donald J. Trump, the White House, March 13, 2020.
Referred to the Committees on Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means and ordered printed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6201, making emergency supplemental appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020, and for other purposes as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6201, a bill making emergency supplemental appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Lowy, and the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Granger, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Lowy.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 6201 currently under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
The Families First Coronavirus Response Act builds on the $8.3 billion supplemental enacted last week to meet the needs of the American people by guaranteeing free coronavirus testing, providing paid leave, strengthening food security initiatives through additional investments in WIC, food banks, and senior nutrition. The bill also makes sure that children who depend on free and reduced price meals have access to food during school and child care closes. Mr. Speaker, we must help ensure the physical safety and financial security of our nation's working families during this time of crisis. I urge my colleagues to join me in support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 6201, the second coronavirus relief bill. Fiscal year 2020 appropriations bills were enacted less than 3 months ago, which included record levels of spending on our public health infrastructure. This allowed the administration to respond immediately to the coronavirus when the threat became clear. Last week, the House and Senate voted almost unanimously on an $8 billion emergency supplemental, giving the administration new resources to respond to the virus. Unfortunately, the threat we face has grown more complex and costly in only a week's time. The bill before us will provide a second installment of supplemental funds and combat the negative economic effects of this disease that has now been called a pandemic. This legislation builds off of last week's bill, where we expanded the availability of tests for the coronavirus to ensure that everyone who needs to be tested gets tested. In his remarks today, the President reaffirmed his commitment to distribute millions of tests and speed up how they are processed. This bill takes the next step to include more than $1 billion to cover the cost of taking these tests, including for service members and veterans. We must ensure tests are administered so that people know if they are infected. This is the only way we can stop the spread of this virus. Emergency food assistance is provided in the bill for seniors, women, children, and low-income families. This includes additional help for children whose schools are being closed as a precautionary measure to keep them safe. Tax incentives are included to encourage American businesses to allow employees to take emergency leave to limit spread of the virus. No one should have to choose between getting a paycheck or infecting other people. We have heard many concerns about the needs of small businesses. In addition to the tax incentives in the bill, more than $37 billion is already available from prior appropriations for the Small Business Administration to make loans. As we watch the impact of this virus on our nation's job creators, I will continue working with the administration and my colleagues to ensure they get the help they need. While bringing this bill to the floor has taken much longer than I'd hoped, it is time for Congress to pass it. This bill will give the President and our public health officials the tools that are needed right now to respond to this quickly changing threat. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this measure. We must pass this bill today to help lessen the devastating impact of this global pandemic on the American people. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as he may consume to the gentleman from Massachusetts, the chair of the Committee on Ways and Means, Mr. Neal.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady. I rise in strong support of this important legislative package to protect Americans' health and financial security as our nation confronts the coronavirus crisis. I want to highlight quickly 3 policies that the Ways and Means Committee contributed to the measure before us this evening. First, we're ensuring that coronavirus testing is provided free of charge. It is imperative that anyone who needs to be tested for coronavirus is able to afford that testing. If individuals worry that they can't afford the cost of the test, they'll forego it and risk endangering themselves and their community. To provide Americans with the necessary confidence they need to seek testing, we've included a provision that ensures free coronavirus testing in Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP, as well as for people enrolled in private insurance, the uninsured, tribal communities receiving care outside of Indian health facilities, and our military families. Second, we are making a historic emergency commitment to paid leave for the American family members affected by coronavirus. One of our top priorities was to get Americans affected by coronavirus emergency paid leave so that they could pay their bills. After intense negotiation with Treasury, we have agreed that this is an emergency. We will require employers to provide the leave and reimburse them for the full cost via tax credits. Affected self-employed workers would be eligible for refundable tax credits. In the long run, we need a comprehensive paid leave program like the one in the Family Act. And if we had that now, we would be in a far better place with the options available to us as workers confront these challenges. Finally, we are implementing measures to stabilize the unemployment insurance system and make sure that workers access their earned benefits. These provisions will immediately help states deal with spikes in unemployment and prepare them for any future local or national recessions. These provisions give states necessary flexibility to provide unemployment insurance to coronavirus-affected individuals without delays caused by waiting periods and work search requirements. Now, I want to acknowledge in closing that despite the urgency with which we have worked, this legislation had the benefit of extensive bipartisan negotiations and thoughtful consideration. My staff has worked around the clock, as always, working with Ranking Member Brady's staff to get bipartisan input into these provisions. The Speaker and I have spent much time on the phone with the Secretary of the Treasury to ensure, along with Mr. Mnuchin, that this bill is a solution that the administration and both parties in this institution can support. As a result, we have a very good product here. I'm confident this measure will pass Congress with full bipartisan support and reach the President's desk without issue. As we face this challenge, Americans are looking to their government leaders to come together and present real solutions. Today, we are doing that. We are taking decisive action to help limit the spread of coronavirus, to allow Americans critical access to testing, and to provide families financial security in the near and the long term. Lastly, let me acknowledge the committee staff at the Ways and Means Committee for the work that they have put into this legislative achievement. Legislative Council, who truly put in a Herculean effort to assemble this bill, along with leadership staff, they worked around the clock, all hours of the day and night, to create the immediacy of this legislation that will slow the spread of this virus, support American workers, families, and save lives. In particular, I want to acknowledge the teams on our health, worker, and family support, select revenue measures, Social Security subcommittees for their excellent contributions. The American people will be better equipped to weather this crisis thanks to their important bipartisan work. And with that, I urge full support for this legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from New York reserves.
Mr. Speaker.
The members are reminded to take their conversations off the floor. The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady, for 4 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Trump's declaration of a national emergency is a call to action to protect Americans' health and well-being and protect the economy. This bill, thanks to the leadership of Secretary Mnuchin and Leader McCarthy, and working with both sides of the aisle, meets many of these goals. The President has succeeded in working with the private sector to achieve free testing, and now our bill builds on that. Americans that need lab tests for the coronavirus will get them free. We're making good on President Trump's promise to provide financial assistance for working Americans who are ill, quarantined, or caring for others due to coronavirus. And it does so using our tax code rather than by creating a new entitlement. The original bill contained provisions that would create undue burdens on America's small businesses. I've spoken directly with President Trump, a champion of small business, who agrees that America's small businesses need flexibility and cash flow when providing emergency leave for workers so that they can operate and survive during this economic challenge. In order to help small businesses and their workers, language has been added to this bill, and President Trump is directing the Secretaries of the Treasury and Labor to write rules to ensure that small businesses do have the flexibility to provide paid leave for their employees. They shouldn't have to be concerned about cash flow when they work to retain the workers they need to operate and keep serving their customers in our communities. This is vital to America's economic rebound. This bill also protects seniors and those with severe medical conditions by ensuring that Social Security Administration is not running a new permanent mandate. We are also able to stop misguided demands. In this bill, the health provisions are now limited to the COVID-19 without including unrelated treatments, ensuring that pro-life Hyde Amendment protections remain intact to prevent taxpayer funds being used for abortions. And Republicans were able to block efforts to add new burdens on hospitals that would have overruled the CDC's science-based guidelines and prevented critical flexibility for our local healthcare providers. These are temporary, targeted measures. They are temporary because we've seen what happens when a bill that's supposed to be timely, targeted, and temporary drags on for years. It prolongs economic hardship. We will rebound, and we will rebound strongly. Good policies, one that strengthens our local communities, result in speedy recoveries. And in America, we know we are blessed, even when faced with great adversity. We are blessed by the abundance not only of resources, but of spirit. It is that very spirit that will get us through coronavirus and any other challenges we face in the future. While today's bill is not perfect, it is another step in the right direction towards safety and security and a revitalized economy. I encourage my colleagues to vote for this bill and then come back to the table so we can continue our work to keep American workers and families prepared, safe, and healthy. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Texas.
I urge a yes vote on this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. The gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the hour is late. Vote yes, and I yield back.
She yields back. Gentlewoman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6201 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
And the yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 363, the nays are 40, one recorded as present, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Sp-
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Sp-
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. Members are reminded to take their conversations off the floor. Gentlemen may proceed. Oh, I already. Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, the House has now spoken in a clear voice and approved this bipartisan bill.
The House is not in order. The members are asked to take their conversations off the floor. The House continues to not be in order. The members are asked to take their conversations off the floor. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the House has now spoken in a clear voice and approved this bipartisan bill. If there are any developments that would require members to return before our scheduled return date of March 23rd, 24 hours notice will be provided. I want to thank all members for their patience as leaders on both sides worked hard to negotiate the coronavirus response legislation the House has now adopted. Much remains to be done, but we have done good work last week on behalf of the American people and a good work this week on behalf of the American people, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Wyoming seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the House Republican Conference, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 903, resolved that the following named member be and is hereby ranked as follows on the following standing committee of the House of Representatives. Committee on the Judiciary, Mr. Jordan to rank before Mr. Collins of Georgia.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that in the engrossment of the bill, H.R. 6201, the clerk be authorized to make technical corrections and conforming changes to the bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Homeland Security and the Committee on Energy and Commerce be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 6160, and I ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6160, a bill to extend the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards Program of the Department of Homeland Security.
Is there objection to the consideration of the bill? Without objection, the bill is engrossed, read a third time, and passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair lays before the House the following enrollments.
Senate 1678, an act to express United States support for Taiwan's diplomatic alliances around the world.
Okay. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does a gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Ruby White Whittle Smith on the occasion of her 100th birthday. Ms. Smith has been a district resident for 95 years. She was born in South Hill, Virginia on March 15th of 1920 and moved to Orange, New Jersey 5 years later. Ms. Smith graduated from Orange High School and later the New York Institute of Dietetics. She started her career as a hospital dietitian and worked at Community Hospital in Newark, New Jersey. Then she spent 30 years as a clerk at Western Electric. But she is known and loved for her passions. Her dedication to New Hope Baptist Church in East Orange, her enjoyment of Denzel Washington movies, and her love of peppermints and bingo. So happy birthday to Ruby Ann Whittle Smith. She is truly 100 years young. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is quite sad something this important had this kind of procedure. Now, I got a bill at around 9 o'clock or so. I was told it was the most recent draft. I read through that, and I got through it in time to have a number of questions, highlighted, tagged, and then I wasn't able, my staff was trying to get a copy of the bill we were going to vote on and get it right before the buzzer goes off. We're going to have a vote in 15 minutes. This is no way to handle something so important, part of which my problem, my concerns, and questions I couldn't get answered are going to put some people out of business. And I get over here and people hadn't read it, so they can't answer my questions. This is no way to handle billions and billions of dollars when we're trying to help people, and we don't even know whether we'll help them or hurt them. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The hour is late, but I wanted to rise to speak to my constituents. We are facing a novel illness in the coronavirus, and I know that many are feeling nervous and uncertain with this type of disease, but I want to remind my community in Northern Illinois that we have some tools at our disposal, common sense solutions like making sure to wash our hands and use hand sanitizer, to sanitize frequently touched surfaces, and to refrain from touching our faces. But we also need to make sure that we are extending common courtesies and kindness and respect to our neighbors. And if you're feeling sick, stay home. And if you're really feeling sick, please call ahead to your healthcare provider so that they can be ready to accommodate you. Together, our country will survive the coronavirus and make it through this challenging time. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as I stand before the words, "In God We Trust," tonight we took a vote to save the lives of our fellow Americans. I'm very glad that what we did today was for families, healthcare worker protections, emergency paid leave, emergency unemployed insurance, paid 6 days for public health emergencies, and personal and family care. I will go home to my district and convene meetings regarding those who are dealing with education, healthcare, and testing. But the main thing that we must do is we must test every single American that is showing signs or needs. And what we have in this bill is to provide free testing. But in addition, we have organized the bipartisan Congressional Coronavirus Task Force. We're doing that to engage with members as they are away in their districts. This is the most contagious, more contagious than the flu and more deadly. Let us be assured that we take care of the American people. I intend to do so in my state of Texas and intend to make sure that resources go to save lives. In God we trust. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Lewis of Georgia for Friday, March 13th.
Without objection, the request is granted. Pursuant to Section 7B of House Resolution 891, the House stands adjourned until 11 a.m. on Monday, March 16th, 2020.